please let me know. All right, what we're going to go through today is just modelling methods. Some of this may be sort of pretty simple type stuff, but it's just also going through a few different ideas and different ways of sort of approaching different modelling techniques. So, as per usual, these will be recorded, so I'll send them to Clinton. Clinton will pass them through the normal process as usual. All right, so what we're going to try and go through is things like floors, just reinforcing basics, you know, like doing openings, making sure you know how to do falls in slabs, framing, when it's flat framing member versus reference planes, versus also looking at floor options, and also different foundation elements, being obviously arrays and whatnot. So, all right, so first one, basically floors. You know, generally within Revit there's three options: vertical, shaft, and biface. So I'll just each time we're going to do a quick demo of what the differences are. Basically, obviously, you know, if it's biface, if the floor moves, the opening goes with it, whereas shaft and vertical are in the position that you first originally did it. Another thing to consider is also basically when the floor is on a slope, how the vertical faces interact. So, just bear with me for a tick. Let's clean this up. And what floor am I on? I'm on the site. Okay, so if I just quickly create another floor, just seeing go options. So obviously under the normal opening option, so the most common one people use at the moment would be more than likely be vertical. So that's just basically select the floor, select the opening, and that will punch a hole through at the same time. Okay, so that's that one there. So I'll do this at the same time so you can see it in 3D. Next one, obviously, shaft. I use shaft a lot where, in two instances, one where the opening is in the same location multiple floors because shaft is shaft, but also I often use this even if it's just a one-off penetration, and the main reason is I can use symbolic lines to represent. So if I attach my symbolic lines, this basically gives you the cross representation. Now obviously you can sort of see how the height, that's why it's not showing there. So if I just instantly just drop that down a value, it should pop through. Because what I've seen in the past, people then are just coming along and doing detail lines, which is okay for the openings. However, if obviously the changes from the architect come back and you have to change the opening, you then have to basically change the symbolic representation. So that's why I often use the shaft location. I just find sometimes that's a better effort or better job. The other one is biface. So if I select it, so the biface means obviously I can use this on floors, walls, beams, etc. So if I select my floor, normal opening, and obviously I'd have to go and do the symbolic representation. Now, obviously the main difference, if I now select my floor and move it around, you can see how the face option stayed as it is, or sorry, is going with the floor, whereas the other two are in the original positions. Another thing to consider, just moving the line these up. Okay, so that's my normal opening at the moment. So you can see, let's add some shade. If I now decide to, what I want to do, add boundary slope. Okay, so the first one was vertical opening. As you can see, the face is vertical. The next one is shaft. It is vertical. Whereas if I now go to face, you can see how it's perpendicular. So that's just something to be aware of if you're going with those options. Okay, obviously the other option for putting penetrations in, so these are, I suppose, just the variations. We've got, as they say, out-of-the-box options, which is what Revit gives you. Same deal if I create a floor. So in this case here, if I go edit boundary and I actually now do my openings, I can do it that way. I can do multiple all in one go. So that's editing the outline. So look, it's muchness. Again, though, however, if you need to show symbolic lines, I'd tell the detailed model lines to come along and still display that information. So the probably the final option, which is what the guys in Perth were doing, was basically using an opening. Let's get a picture here. Using basically a component family. So it's like a generic model and it cuts a chunk out of the slab, which I'll show you. So in this case here, it's been set up. So I didn't make this family. This is the one the guys have been using in Perth. So if I place on the face, which is the slab, so that all looks good. As you can see, it's automatically dropped down. Okay, so obviously if it was a full penetration, that is fantastic. That goes all the way through. However, the situation in Perth, the guys were using it obviously just for a recess, which is all good. The problem that you'll find, if I just quickly move this one over here. So it looks like such, as you can see at the moment. So see, I've got a 200 slab. In this case here, say I've got 100. Now, obviously, this family has basically different variations to do for the depth, so called peno depth. So if I change that to be 50, obviously it will be 50. Now, generally that all looks okay. The issue really becomes when you need to, if you have to start putting floor tags on. So if you put a floor tag in here, as we know it says 200. However, you want the floor tag to be 150 in that area in there, and that's probably the biggest problem with using that type of family is you can't essentially do a live tag, which is part of the database. So if you opt to use that sort of penetration, use it with caution, and/or use it as a full penetration. Okay, another thing with floors, basically, how to basically put different falls on it. So the first one I'm going to do is called modify sub-elements. Same deal. I will bear with me to clean this up. Okay, so I'll just quickly draw myself a floor. Okay, so obviously to place under, as soon as you select the floor in 2012, comes up with the options modify subpoints. If I now go, well, I want to modify or add a point. If I select add a point, instantly you can sort of see these green squares. If I click on one of those, generally the value is 0 because it's flat. But if I want to now go add a point, I might decide to add, say, a point in the middle and say a point in the middle. Press escape once, I'm still activated, as you can see it's still green, and then you can sort of see your little symbol that comes up. If I now select it, and I've got an option of 0 or enter 0 over here. So if I now change that to be 200 up, as you can sort of see, it's starting to put 4 lines in. So if I now put in, say, 300, if I just manually go and put in another point over here, see how it's automatically tried to calculate between 0 and 300, being 131. So if I now move that over here, it's held the value, but I can still obviously go and put in 150 if I wish, or if I put in, say, minus 50. So escape, and you can sort of start seeing what it's doing. So the pink at the moment is just to do with my view template. So if I want to now modify that subpoint, obviously to select it, modify, and realise, oh, that should have been 50, not 150. Okay, so all of a sudden you can sort of see how it's falling and then got some levels. Now, at any time, often when using this sort of modified subpoints, you may not want to always see these lines. So just be aware that in the show all floors, okay, it's the, if I go interior edges and turn them off, it's those. Okay, but if for some reason you want to just say you don't want to show that line, well, there's nothing wrong with just using the line work tool and turning it to be invisible lines, and it will disappear. So you can still sort of maintain what you want. So that's using line work tool. So that's one example, just doing modified subpoints. Let's draw another floor over here. Another common method is, if it's nice and easy, as in sort of always falls about the middle, is sometimes adding a split line. So if I add a split line down the middle, tab once, that little symbol comes up. Now if I select the blue line, I've now got a value. If I do 200, and you can sort of see what's done. Now if I just go modify subpoints, see instantly it's updated those values. So that's using split line. So you can sort of use that like for roof slabs and whatnot. Okay, and then finally the last option, if I just go and put in a beam, which happens to be 600 by 1200, I might change the size of that. So it starts to come in a bit better. Okay, if I select my floor again and then go pick support, reading down the bottom it says pick a beam to define new support for slab. Okay, so if I highlight, and you can sort of see how it highlights, if I pick it, it will then find the centroid of that beam. Same deal, one escape, comes back to the symbol, select it, enter a value, and then off it goes. Okay, so it's, even though it did use the support, all I'm doing instead of the split line option, I'm just using it as a quick start point. Unfortunately though, it doesn't really go with it. It doesn't lock onto it. So if I went modify, you can't align and lock. Haven't tested in 2013 as yet. So that's basically in short how you sort of do your floors and putting in proper falls. Now, obviously, in addition to those, which is pretty important, spot levels. So you can sort of see if I start at that point there, which is RL 6.5. But if I'm moving up, now that was up at 300, so that's 6.8. So that's all 6.8. Okay, so that's the beauty of if you're modelling properly, then you can always put spot levels on. Great if you're doing deck bridges or any special fall in your structure. In addition to that, you can also do fall arrows, so called slope point. So if I now say select that, I just select I'll just go and quickly chuck an arrowhead on the end. Okay, so it's dynamic. So if I select that and go modify, select my floor, change that to be 400 up, and you'll see the value change accordingly. So you can very quickly do your 10% fall or whatever it needs to be. And also don't forget with these sort of fall arrows, you do have options how to control the units. So that's just editing the type properties of it. Okay, you can define, if I go none, now I might go 3 decimal places, apply, and it takes it off. Okay, so, and I can always put a suffix after it. Okay, so that's just a few options. Another way, for very simple slabs is obviously just using the fall arrow. Okay, so if I've just got a quick floor in there, which is that one there. Okay, so if I now just go edit boundary, I have an option here called slope arrow. And it's basically just pick, start, and finish. So the important thing is, now if I select my slope arrow, in the properties, I have 2 options basically talking about the tail and the head. So the tail is the tail of the arrow, and the head is the head of the arrow. So in this case here, obviously tail starts, I might want to go up, so if I change it to 0 and then change that to be 300, I might do something a bit more, 500 as an example, and then finish, and you'll see it sloping up. Okay, same deal. You can obviously do slope arrows. As you wish. Obviously modify the point accordingly. And then finally to do floors, the other option is to define the slope. Now this is only good for obviously a one-off slope. So you can use this method instead of fall arrows if you wish. Correct that again. Okay, if I edit boundary. If I select an edge, just like doing a roof, okay, I have an option here called define slope, and I can go 5 degrees if I wish. Okay, so and that will then obviously do a 5-degree slab going down. So I could have done -5. Back on slope arrow, one thing I did forget to mention is you do have a couple options talking about height of the tail. You can also do slope. So at the moment, see, it says 18.43. If I change it to 300, it still holds that, so often you might have to do 15 degrees as an example. Okay, so it's just another method of it. So it's a bit like sort of defining slopes. So I often use this option just for quick ramps because I just find normally, someone's telling me it's 3 degrees or whatever it has to be. So all right, so that's essentially drawing floors and doing different slopes. Now, the next thing I want to look at is framing beams. Basically, a good rule one, basically, if it's horizontal beam, if it's a horizontal element, being the framing member, try and use working planes, and then obviously adjust the justification as required, and obviously consider the lateral justification, which is the way it's sort of positioned. So this is the lateral justification. You can sort of see here it says side 1, place it to the sides, centre, which I'll do in a minute, and side 2. This is the Z justification, top, centre, bottom, other, basically how it's positioned. Okay. So all I've drawn in, so just drawing beams, everyone knows how to draw a beam, so it's no different. Horizontal framing. Okay. In this case here, I'm using my level, which is called framing. All right. So at the moment, you can sort of see the lateral justification is centre. So if I do another one, okay, in this case here I'm going to turn off the tag so I don't see it. I'll do another one here. So these three are these three, as you can see. Okay, so lateral justification, if I change it to side 1, you should see it pop over. So it still holds basically that positioning. So it's got this method I use if it's PFC against a blockwork wall. And then side 2 will go that side. Then obviously with all these options, I'll just delete that. Stick to okay, obviously the first one's top. You can sort of see the blue dot. Okay, if I do centre, okay, bottom, and then other. And as soon as you go other, you've got an option for Z justification comes into it. Okay, so I can do minus 200, and I can go down. Okay. So that's using basically the working plane method where it's nice and flat. The other thing just to consider, just a point of note, is I just blindly drew these in, and I just said structure usage automatic. Okay, just be aware of it because you do have the options that change to the 5 defined options: girder, horizontal, joist, other. Okay, so if I did as purlin as an example. As soon as I do that, I then all of a sudden under the subcategories of framing, Okay, so I've got purlins here and Sussedisp here. Okay, so it just gives me options through that. Unfortunately, that's the only options you have. You can't go and make your own. The only other way around it, just sort of digressing a bit, is basically setting up a parameter. I have one under my ID data called steel name. I might have also one here called usage. Where is it? B&W element type. So yeah, this one might be called rafter. And then if I wanted more, I would then obviously go BG, filters, add, edit, create, call that for now. Rafter. Oops, what happened there? Anyway, you get the idea. I'm not doing filters and that, but that's how I control mine, so not quite sure what happened there. All right, so that's using working plane method. Obviously, next one is reference plane. So, rule 2, I say, when it's not horizontal in any way, use a reference plane. Most importantly, name the reference plane. Good rule of thumb is if you ever open up an existing model, if it's got a name to the reference plane, it means it's important. If it's a reference plane's just being used for some modeling method in some form, you will run the risk of people deleting it in what they think is a good way to clean up the drawings. More importantly, it's easy to modify different angles, so if the architect changes their mind. Okay, so if I now go and draw, come on here. Right, so I've got one called reference 2, one called reference 1. That's my reference plane. So, as you know, home, draw a reference plane, draw from there to there. Okay, and then give it a name. So I've already got some prepared. Do that. Okay, so if I now go and draw a beam, steel beam, so as long as you name them, if you name them, you have the option to pick them. If you don't name them, that will not display. So if I now use reference 1 and draw a beam there, you'll see it instantly turn up. And then if I use reference 2 and draw a beam there, it will turn up there. Now, obviously, if I change my view depth, it will display. So obviously, as per before, I've got the options of Z, other, center. If I just chuck them in center for now, that one. I'll just do one for now as an example so you can see what it does. Okay, now the main reason I like these is if I had 20 beams, i.e. rafters, all at that angle, okay, so there they all are there. If all of a sudden the height changes, it's very quickly just to pick one up and all will go up. But more importantly, where it's very handy, if I now rotate and change my angle, okay, and if I place my base point, say, and it always rotates about that point, and all of a sudden the angle becomes that angle, okay, they all go to that angle. So rather than sort of deleting, redoing or anything, you get those sort of options very quickly. So basically the rules, use reference planes on where it's on a slope and name the reference plane. Very important. And just a point of note that if you come across if I select, say, that element there, even if it's a flat one, if I select a flat one, talks about working plane, it tells you where it is. Okay. If I select my rough that's on an angle, talks about working plane, so it talks about reference one. Now, if I just select this, if I go move, I'll just go disjoin, so I'll break it. Hang on. I want to do this one. Constrain, disjoin. Okay, I've just moved that down, so it says not associated. So if I now select my reference plane for all my others, see how all the others move up that way? Okay, so just another point, so if I move that back to where it is. So it's very important, try not to move things around so you don't break the working plane or the reference plane. If for some reason that one had to be bumped up higher, just copy your reference plane up. Give it another name. We know that one's called ref1, so let's call it ref1 new. If I select that one then I go, okay, well I need to get him up. So if I now select him and then go edit working plane and drop down edit working plane, he will bump up. Now that method of edit working plane only works if it is parallel. Okay, so if I selected, I just now rotate that. Okay, different angle, edit working plane. See, I don't get the option. So very important. So I use that method where it's parallel. I might create a reference plane to do with level 1 or level 2 warnings. So that way I'm not sort of retracing my steps basically. Okay. Just another method which I showed the guys in Perth, just possible options of why looking at drawing as in concrete beams as floors, and something to consider as a future element. Okay, just clean this up. Okay, so there is a conventional. Okay, so there we are there. So there is a conventional beam. Okay, obviously when you've got sloped edges, the only way around that is either make a beam that has a slanted face and therefore you can have a parameter, or the only other option is by opening by face. You select the beam and then obviously select the slab edge, so you got it right, and then basically go up from there. Okay, obviously you always get this error, of course, about partial cutting the host, because you're not cutting it all out, it's just reminding you. So that all looks good, that's fine. So then obviously if the beam moves, unless I aligned and locked, and hopefully it might work, but you start to get into those sort of problems. Another method where you've got really curved or odd things is potentially look at doing a floor called 200, then one called a beam 200. Sorry guys, I'll turn my mail off. Okay, so if I do a floor 200, a beam is 200, and now the floor is 200. So alright, so I'll just generally look at that. I've just changed colour there so you can sort of see what it does. So you can sort of see, the three different elements. Now, obviously, basically the line work right, so it's all hidden. It's just a matter of joining. So if it's join will clean them up, so everything looks okay. Apply a view template. Yeah. just a beauty thing, why it's not a lot of just to do with the colour. Anyway, that will clean that up. The other important reason down the track why, besides obviously making it, in some cases easy to modify, I'll just go to a 3D view, which is that. If I just quickly do a temporary show of the analytical, you can sort of see how framing members only shows a single line, the analytical, whereas being floors, you can actually sort of see the width of the beam. So depending, sometimes in different design programs, especially floor beams, when they put in wrapped and other programs, they need to sort of be able to span from there to there to there and across, whereas it doesn't always work from there to a support to there. So it's just something to consider that, down the track, if you guys are starting to have to spit more information out for engineers, potentially your work methods may need to change accordingly. So I often use a lot of these now, or I used to use a lot of these now, because we were starting to spit stuff out in the Strand and other programs for the engineers. So yes, initially it's a bit fiddlier, but there's probably a bit more gain at the back end. So okay, shoring. Okay, sorry, there's some questions just reading, so I'll come back to those. I want that. There we go. Okay, shoring, everyone knows you can just do basically as, some have done them as columns. I always try to do an isolated foundation, only because it then gets categorised as foundation, so it's a different element. So yes, you can do that. If you have multiple of those, yes, you can then do an array. So if I go to second, and then if I went, say, 2 metres apart, and then went 5, does an array, which is all good. Okay, so that way you can do individual marks, everything you need to do. Another method which I use a lot of for shoring is using essentially a wall, a curtain wall. So basically what I do is if I set up a curtain wall, say piles with 20 gap, and basically if you watch there at the same time, I can then essentially draw a string. I'll draw it. Okay, so within this family, basically if I go edit type, it's basically made up of mullions. So basically I've made a mullion profile accordingly. So I'd make a new type if it was 600 versus 1200 and then change it accordingly. What are other advantages of this method besides being very quick? Obviously being a wall, I can edit the profile. Have to step it down for some reason. So this is just like getting a wall profile, nothing special. Finish. Spin it around and sort of start seeing what it does. Now obviously sometimes you need to take piles out. So yes, I can tab to each individual pile, unpin it, delete it. Okay, so yes, you can take it out as need be. So you do have control. Sometimes these get a bit fiddly, truncated corners, but if it's just a pretty square shape, sometimes I find that a lot quicker and easier. Yes, See how sometimes it sort of like needs a bit of fiddly work, which is fine. Okay, but it's just, you know, it's trying to sort of grab different node points, so that's all you got to do for those. Okay, so obviously, you know, getting to those sort of angles might be a bit fiddlier, but, you know, it doesn't take long to sort of get it right. And then you very quickly get a shoring system out. Another method, if I was in the situation that I had individuals and I didn't want to use shorings or whatever it may be, I would very quickly make a quick family. Which one is it? Okay, so this is just using my individual pier. Okay, so that's using my individual piers. And then all I've done so I've placed one as it is. New reference plane. Done the array, 600 centres. Okay, so that way I can control the spacing, I can control sizes, I can do whatever I wish. Number of I can control, so end result. So close that. Just place it there. Okay, so if I drop down, if I go spaces now at 600. Okay, that will tighten up. I could then have another parameter that will control, which I haven't in this case, control the size. All of a sudden bump that to 1200, change spacing to 1200. And then off I go. So, okay, so again, tab will take you to individual ones, being the family, because it's nested. Okay, you can then obviously make that a foundation element, and off you go from there. So that's curtain walls, individuals, families. So, you know, in short, that's, you know, as I said, you know, this is just sort of running through different options for different modelling methods. So, there's a couple of questions here. Okay, I'm going to unmute you all, and then I'll just run through the questions. Okay, first one, Clinton, cut to reference plane.
Oh, that was when you were doing the beam and the slab.
Is in like a steel work beam?
Yeah.
As in like if I put a reference plane at an angle.
Yeah.
Whoops, hang on. Yep. So it's definitely one option. Agree. So and like also like if I had a grid there, I'm pretty sure I'd place a grid. Pretty sure I can do the same method for cutting against grid.
Should be able.
Yep. Yep. So sometimes you might find, obviously you've got grids following all those sort of shapes. You know, like the issue that the guys had in Perth, obviously they had curved faces and those sort of things, like really truncated, which is fine. However, in 2013, they can actually now do all different shape grids. So potentially, you know, that might sort of fix that issue that, you know, the architects were just having straight grids and then you have to come along and then cut framing and whatnot. So, all right. Laylene,
was,
sorry. Yep, you need to make it fine view. Which one, Laylene, you talking about, mate?
It was that one there where the hidden lines were not showing up after you joined the 3 slabs. I was thinking whether it was something to do with the detail level at all.
As in this one here?
Yeah, no, it doesn't seem like.
Yeah, it's just a view thing. It's just probably got more to do with my view template and.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yep. So.
That's cool.
That one for me was just about your curtain walls and yards of that one. I guess I've got a comment about using slabs as beams.
Yep.
We've definitely been down that route in the early days, especially with big band beams. My comment, I guess, would be, and people can agree or disagree, I'll be interested to hear the comments, that would be a last resort, only from a scheduling point of view. However, it does cross a grey line as, when does a slab become a beam?
Yep.
When it's 1,200 wide and 400 deep,
Yep. Yep. I agree. My preference in the past is always try and use the framing elements because it was always quicker. Even though it might have been cutting a face or cutting about a reference plane, whatever it was quick. However, the only issue we found, and that's why I had to go the other way, was because we were then coordinating with engineers. That's why, hence I was sort of qualifying up front, in the future, it just may be something to look at. That once exporting out to the engineers and softwares, they may start requiring this sort of information. So that's really where it's going to come from. So I believe there's more reason to sort of stick to the current method at the moment, sort of thing. So, but your engineers might be happy with just designing to center lines rather than to sort of wide flat beams.
Oh, I agree. Okay.
Any other questions, guys?
I don't.
Nope. Laylene, James, all good?
Anyone else does this one?
Yeah, just another one, Peter. If I forwarded this invite to other members of my group, will it work, or will the invite need to come from you?
Sorry, say again.
I'll fill you in on the philosophy, not to say that you can't do it, Laylene. The philosophy was that because of potential bandwidth issues or whatever, we're sort of inviting the working group members. Now, obviously, there's a threshold there, and I don't know what that is. They're recorded, so when he sends them to me, I send around an email so that everyone's got the link to LiveLink, and they're also in a spreadsheet as well. So they'll be freely
this one will be a recorded session.
Yeah.
You're on. It's recording you right now.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so no swearing, mate. It goes on the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, plus it's easier for me just to send out half a dozen invites rather than 50. So, it's far easier to sort of manage this way.
Yeah, definitely, mate.
Yeah. So, all right. If no other questions, all good.
Once again, thank you, Pete.
No worries, guys. Talk soon.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Bye.